wonderful to see. For this is the Needham Housing Coalition. This is an open monthly meeting. I'm Paula Gifford. The other steering committee members are Oscar Woods and
Thank you, Wolf.
and Stone and Jim Flanagan and Moses. We did have that one other meeting here in November, our kind of kickoff with CHAPA. So we were about, and since then we've been holding small group meetings, we've been doing research, we've been working on the MBTA communities, and we have a lot of work to do, and hope that some of you will have the time and inclination to join us. I want to hand it over to Sade Bradley, and also introduce Whitney, which is a local board of CHAPA. They are wonderful partners in this endeavor.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Sade Ratliff. I am with CHAPA. I'm a program associate, and we're really just a supportive effort with the Needham Housing Coalition, helping them sort of get themselves off the ground and also find points to engage you all. I am going to unfortunately be siloed to this little computer. The string only goes so far, so I'll be on the tech side of things. But we want to start guys off with a little icebreaker. We have a little bit bigger of a group than we intended, so I think it might work. Folks on Zoom, feel free to engage with us as well. We want to start by asking you, what type of housing do you live in now? So for folks that occupy a single family unit, so there's one house, you, your family, your yard, and whatever else is in the back, would you raise your hand, show of hands, what kind of folks? Okay. Okay. Most of us. Folks on Zoom, I'm not sure if you can hear me okay, but could you give us a raised hand for those of you guys that live in single family units?
We have one so far, Sarah.
Sorry, if we do, you said if we do live in a single family?
Yes.
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 All right. So we have a couple of folks on Zoom. Any folks that occupy multifamily?
Now, guys,
Multi-family
I
units.
think you guys have a little bit of representation. I will hold it down for the folks that are living in the apartment building.
We have one on. We have two on Zoom.
Okay, two folks on Zoom. I dig it. If I chance, I'm looking at a mixed. In a mixed use building? No. Right. Yeah, I wish I could just walk downstairs and have my. Yes.
I'm getting some messages over Zoom that people can't hear very well.
Okay,
So
you want to troubleshoot?
May have to stand closer to the owl.
Yeah, the owl. Does that work? People on Zoom. People on Zoom. Hear me a little bit better now.
Yes.
Thanks, Keith.
Not getting it. Can you guys hear Sade a little bit better now, folks who are on Zoom?
A little bit. It's kind of in and out. I think maybe when she moves around, or I don't know, but it kind of goes in and out.
Okay.
But it's better when she's closer, yes?
When I'm closer, yeah.
I see
Yeah,
not.
that sounds better.
Okay.
Thanks, Alyssa.
I do. So we just want to get a lay of the land, see sort of who's in the room, and what you all occupy, so that when we do have these conversations or yourself within. Lily's going to be giving us sort of a good, nice party rundown of the MBTA protocol, what all this zoning language means, what the ins and the outs. I will pass it to my colleague. Yeah. And I can talk real loud. So we're just gonna give you a minute to pull up the slide. I did, yes. So if any of you who are on this side want to angle yourself there, feel free to do so. I'm just gonna make it easier to see. And if we can just go and presenting the title. Okay. Well, I want to thank the Needham Housing Coalition for having me tonight. My name is Linke. I'm the MBTA Communities Engagement Manager at CHAPA. I work with Sade and Whitney, but I am specifically focused on the MBTA community zoning and supporting communities that fall under that act. What that means. So we can get started. So today we're going to be talking, I'll give you a quick introduction for those who aren't familiar with CHAPA and the Municipal Engagement Initiative, that is the Needham Housing Coalition.
we'll go through some kind of zoning 101, what is zoning, why does it matter, how does it impact the community that you see today, an overview of the MBTA Act, and what it might look like in Needham, and then how you can be engaged. So CHAPA's mission is to encourage the production and preservation of housing that is affordable to low and moderate income families and individuals, and to foster diverse and sustainable communities through planning and community development. And we do that in a lot of different ways, policy advocacy, managing affordable housing, but folks here tonight are from the Municipal Engagement Initiative. Next slide. So the Municipal Engagement Initiative was launched in 2018. In response to what we saw as a real need for more support for pro-housing businesses on the ground. Because at the end of the day, housing is built at the local level, so it's made or broken by local support. And we saw that in many communities, while we certainly knew that there were many residents who were supportive of creating more housing opportunity, they weren't necessarily as engaged or as vocal as they needed to be in order to. So that's where we come in. With our coalition building that we do, and that we've done our full MEI program in about over 20 communities at this point, and then we've done our MEI Light program and some more light touch supports for housing coalitions in another 20 or so. So we've been all over the state, but I'll tell you a little bit about my program. So my technical assistance, like I've done specifically for MBTA communities, and it's actually primarily targeted at planning staff, planning board or select board members, other official boards or committees, and elected officials as well. This is a program I've been running since January last year, and I'm currently supporting over 50 communities across the region. It's a cohort model, so communities are split up into cohort with comparable communities, which share similar characteristics, whether it's governance structure, transit type, current sort of housing production, what type of housing is ground. We meet monthly to do some strategizing and discussion, educational components, different peer learning, what are folks struggling with, what are people have creative solutions for. We also do monthly learning sessions where we can do more of a deep dive into topics that are adjacent to 3A, zoning and housing more generally. So, how can you create more housing opportunity while maintaining your water at the same or even a lower level than your water growth. So those are some of the topics we get into, and then I also provide some degree of support going into communities, presenting on the law, consulting on their community engagement strategy. So I'm actually not technically working with Needham at this point. They the town's program, but I'm here tonight to obviously my connection to MEI that can do it.
That would be great.
Sorry, but just a little map that doesn't quite cover the whole, show you everything. Pull that up.
I just asked why it's the town one.
They should, if you ask me. So it's my program, sort of an room. There's an application, but I can invite anybody. So I've contacted everyone that I can find contacted in every one of the 177 communities.
Okay.
If any select
All right.
board members or other folks in town are interested, that is very
I
interesting.
think I'm done. I call this officially tabled till
Yeah,
next
this
month.
doesn't totally cover.
Okay. How's that?
Can you- You can
Alright.
stop, okay, perfect.
I got it.
Got it.
Yeah. It's a busy Zoom. There's a lot of people on the Zoom. So you guys are doing good work. You're doing good work. Yeah.
Sense of like the good range of communities that I'm working with, all different scales, lots of commuter rail suburbs like Needham. Slide. So let's get into the good stuff. Zoning 101. What is it? Why do we care?
Hi, could I just interrupt for a second and say that the slides aren't moving on the screen and it's kind of hard to hear, so it's hard to follow what's going on.
I'm sorry. I can stop sharing my screen,
That's okay.
then I'll reshare
there-
it again for you guys.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, let's reshare. Let's make sure we share our sound. And then we're sharing the PowerPoint as well. And as a point of accessibility, I do want to ask that we just sort of pause, that we can get the folks on Zoom acclimated. I don't think it's fair that we get all the information and they don't.
State duck out there?
It looks like they're moving now, thanks.
Hopefully, when we go into presentation mode, that still continues, but let us know. So zoning is a code that regulates how we use land. It determines the shape, including the height and the size of the buildings, the distance of buildings and other land uses. For instance, how close can you put industrial use to homes, schools, what the land can be used for, so residential, whether it's single, multi-family, apartment buildings, commercial space, industrial, open space. And it can also include requirements around things like parking, affordability, design standards, et cetera. While zoning can look pretty dry on the page, if any of you have ever looked through a zoning code, they tend to be very long, pretty dry language. But the reality is that zoning codes really are long. They determine what can be built and where. And that determines who can live in a community, who can work there, who can recreate there. It really determines what is possible and who can be there. And it's an incredibly powerful tool. We use it thoughtfully. We can, utilize it for renewable housing, transportation, climate, diversity, and inclusivity. But it has also been used as a tool of segregation solution. Many communities in Massachusetts still have really stringent and flexible zoning that makes it basically impossible to build anything other than a single family home. You might hear the term exclusionary zoning, that refers to that practice. And this pushes out people who obviously work to buy a single family home, which is quite a lot of people, but also people who don't want to live. Many people would rather live in a multifamily or an apartment building because of the amenities and the sense of control.
So next.
Great. So zoning as a practice was really only adopted widely in the United States in the early 20th century. Before that, we were just kind of throwing stuff wherever we could find space for it. And that obviously did present some issues. There were public health concerns around not having more thought put into our land use. But the reality is that as a lot of this zoning was being put in place, this was also around the same time that a lot of Jim Crow laws were being enacted. And so the relationship between these two things, the way they've been utilized to enforce one another, really can't be ignored when we look at the history of zoning, sort of how we got here today. So, even in Massachusetts, while we like to think of ourselves as a liberal bastion, even our beloved Frederick Law Olmsted Jr., who built some of our most notable parks, even he wrote part of the National Advisory Committee on Zoning, and he wrote that in any housing developments which are to succeed, racial divisions have to be taken into account. If you try to force the mingling of people who are not ready to mingle and don't want to mingle, development cannot succeed. So while there are some aspects of zoning that are a little more subtle, there is also plenty of language like this. Even in the zoning codes and manuals of towns here in Massachusetts. One of the ways, once racial covenants and outright banning non-white people from living in a community, once that became outlawed, people found more creative ways to further segregation and exclusion. So oftentimes multifamily housing is more likely to be lived in by incomes, people of color, and as such, making it impossible or illegal for multifamily housing was one way to continue to enforce racial segregation. But the good news is that in the same way that zoning was used to create these problems, it can also be used to solve them. Slides. And just to check in, our friends on Zoom able to see the slides and hear me and everything?
Yes, it's better. Thank you.
Nice.
So some of the impacts that we see of the restrictive zoning that we still have in so many places in Massachusetts today are, of course, first and foremost, the thing that we're all here to talk about is Needham housing coalition is high tourism. Restrictive zoning makes it
Folks on Zoom.
inconsistent with housing projects as well.
It doesn't end.
And actually, the multi prices will start. That's sort of keep on 101. And as of December 2023, this is based off of the Greater Boston Housing.
That
Taking
slide.
the Boston indicator puts out every year. I recommend checking it out. Very
Slide. I mean, this
No.
side, this stuff, move that over. This,
Um,
so these are really small.
in December
So this
2023,
becomes-
the
yeah,
sales price
there
is
you go.
$900,000 for single family
A little
home. And
That
$609,000 for a home in the Greater Boston area. So in places like Needham, it's up and much higher than that. But that is the average, or I'm sorry, the median. They're not the same thing. The median sales price across the board. And only 1 in 12 residents in the Boston metro area has money that would be necessary to buy it. This is even more stark when we look at the contrast between white buyers and buyers of color. 70% of white households in Greater Boston own their home, whereas only 37% of Black households and 31% of Hispanic households. So this is an issue that affects people across race, across class, across, education and various backgrounds, but it is particularly stark when we look at non-white households. It also impacts the traffic that we experience. If you talk to anyone in Boston, they could probably complain to you about the traffic. We actually were ranked second worst for traffic in the entire state by INRIX, which is a transportation analytics firm. They also do an annual report card across the entire world. I don't know how they manage it. But Boston has consistently ranked in the top spot, but number 2 for the 2022 study. And they found that drivers spend an average of 134 hours a year stuck in congestion. So that's 134 hours of just not moving at all. And that's precious time we can use with our families, to pursue our hobbies, to attend events like this. It's time theft, and it impacts all of us in so many ways, in addition to the cost of having to do all that. Being able to live without a car saves you $10,000+ a year. I mean, obviously there's the cost to, lease it, you don't own it, buying the car, you own it, gas, repairs, insurance. It's incredibly. And when we, have only single family homes spreading further and further out, it makes it so that you really have no choice but to live far away from where you work, maybe where your kids go to school, the various places that you need to go. And so that really exacerbates the traffic issue. Additionally, transportation is makes up the greatest share of emissions in the United States. And so when we make it possible for people to drive less, doesn't even mean not at all, but just to drive less, to be able to have some of their needs close by, to be able to work without having to drive, that could have a massive evolution in the United States and in Massachusetts. Okay, now. In addition to the CO2 emissions from cars, and I know this is probably a little hard to see for people in the room, but single family homes also have a greater carbon footprint than multifamily housing when it comes to all the other energies. So on the far left, you have single family detached, single family attached, townhome style, and then multifamily. And you can see that regardless of whether they have, a hybrid vehicle, the single family homes are across the board more carbon. So for, things like heating, cooling your home, all the different energy sources that we need to keep our. It's flat. So yeah, now we have to zoom out again. Make an adjustment. Other direction.
Oh,
Forget that. Okay.
there we go.
All right. So that brings us to the end of the minutes. It is a piece of legislation that was passed in 2021 to try to address that. Right. So growing a healthy and sustainable regional economy requires providing housing options at a wide variety of scales and prices. We all have different needs, different desires, different income levels, and we all deserve to find a place that suits our needs, that is affordable. But decades of underproducing housing across really all of municipalities. This is not any one county's responsibility. This is our collective responsibility to address. Has created a serious housing shortage. So high in home prices, they're pushing out college students. They're leaving seniors with nowhere to downsize, young families unable to get a foot in the door of ownership, and even people with moderate income are struggling to buy even just a modest home in Massachusetts. And this is a serious threat to our economy. It's making it harder for business owners to find and retain employees. It's making it harder for our school districts to retain teachers because they're having to live further away from the schools where they work. And when you're making the teacher's salary and doing the hard work of being a teacher and having a commute of an hour on either end, that is well. And so while this is obviously, I believe an ethical and moral issue, housing and things are right, even if you just look at it from an economic perspective, it is a serious threat to our region's economy. Don't address our lives. So as I said at the beginning, housing is really made or broken at the local level. But the reality is that local governments aren't necessarily elected to think regionally. That's not their responsibility. Their responsibility is to focus on those that their community. But addressing the housing shortage of this scale really requires a regional response. And so that was what motivated the state legislature to pass the MBTA multifamily zoning requirements. You might hear referred to section 3A and it was passed and then signed into law by Charlie Baker in 2021. I do have a little video of something we might watch if it works. Let's give it a shot. And if not, we'll send you the link. You can watch it later. It's only 3 minutes. Cool. Let's think about it.
These are words to work by. Supplies, solutions, support. Call clickgranger.com.
No, it's coming. I'm just sharing it with folks on Zoom. Recently.
Team, if big wireless companies are allowed
On providing technical assistance to communities and applying it a lot. I'm working very closely partnering with them. So last year they put together this free introduction of the video that sort of just gives an explanation of the law, why. And I think they do a really good job sort of helping visualize it. And I think, as you go out into your community and talk to people about this, I think that little video is a helpful step.
We all love Massachusetts, but finding a place to live is close to impossible. We don't build enough homes or offer enough housing choices. This limits availability to those who are looking for a house they can afford, and to those looking to start new careers, grow families, or begin a new chapter in their lives. Our neighborhoods are built out on large, single-family lots that eat away at natural places that we love so much. This means we live farther from school, work, and other daily needs, forcing us to drive everywhere. We spend more time in our cars, adding to the pollution that harms our health and the environment. It also means that our region is more racially segregated, less welcoming, and less diverse, as a lack of housing choice limits where low and moderate income families can afford to live. But there is some good news. Massachusetts is trying to change this. A new law requires 175 communities in Greater Boston to zone for more housing near public transit stations. These new zoning districts offer many benefits. They encourage building more housing choices that consume less land, increasing what's available and affordable, and making these places more inclusive. They encourage communities that are transit-oriented, putting those new homes near transit stations and walkable downtowns, supporting public transportation and access to jobs. This means less time in the car, reducing traffic and pollution, and promoting better health. They encourage complete neighborhoods, which brings people closer not only to daily destinations like work and school, but daily needs like stores, restaurants, and public places, where people can gather and participate in the neighborhood's growing prosperity. Once full compliance is reached with this new law, it could mean 280,000 more homes and a lot more housing choice. These additional homes will help us address the housing, transportation, and climate needs of the Commonwealth, while making our communities more diverse and vibrant. The naysayers think this new law will turn our beloved downtowns into skyscraper cities. But here's the truth. It encourages us to build what we used to, downtowns where everyone can go to mingle and walk to whatever they need. Massachusetts has some great walkable and transit-oriented communities with complete neighborhoods. With smart land use planning, we can make more of these places we love and used to build, benefiting existing residents and creating more opportunities for those who have historically been left on the margins. The Massachusetts Housing Partnership is working with the state to give us the tools and support we need to make this happen. Let's build this future together. Visit our website to learn more.
Coupons.
Additionally, if you're curious at looking I think something else. I think there's must be, and I know that we have some images that Oscar put together that we'll probably be looking at in a bit, in these beautiful booklets that show you what 15 minutes per interaction looks like and examples here in town. The zone must be of a reasonable size, so you can't just say like, okay, we're gonna do this one parcel and we did it, that's it. It must be suitable for families, so you cannot zone and say that it has to be age-restricted housing. Someone could build age-restricted housing if that was what they wanted to do and there would be support for it, but can't require that any housing be restricted. You also can't require that it be only studio or one bedroom, for example, because that also. And if you do have a transit station, a certain percentage of it needs to be within half a mile of that transit station, applicable in four. So awesome. Next one. What are the benefits of multifamily? So many. Older adults can downsize. College kids can come home and rent their first apartment, not have to go back in with their parents. Young couples, homeowners, start family. Low-income families can find stability. Middle-income families have mobility, choice of where they want to live. Small businesses, employees, grandparents can stay close to their children, and feel that. There are also, specifically benefits when it comes to climate. As I talked about, the carbon emissions that comes from cars. I recognize that it is not realistic for the vast majority of people to live without. However, we also know that on average, about 20 to 25% car trips are a mile or less. Those are the kinds of car trips that we really need to be shifting away from in order to meet some of our carbon climate goals. And so when we put housing close to the train station, close to retail, we make it more possible for folks to not need to get in the car to just do a basic daily errand, to get their kids to school, to dentist. That's really what we're focusing on when we talk about trying to get people to step less is those mile or less trips. And in America, if we were to do this nationally, switching even half of those to walking trips would be the equivalent of taking 1 million cars off the road entirely. But even just here in Massachusetts, imagine if like 1 out of every 4 cars would just go. That would do more for our congestion than I think anything else. Neighborhood mobility and proximity to transit also translates to higher home values. And households in walkable communities spend 50% less on average on transportation than their counterparts who do not live in walkable communities. Walkable communities lead to fewer traffic deaths and reduced illness pollution. And people who live in rural neighborhoods are actually less likely to be obese, even considering other socioeconomic factors like age, gender, and income. When you make it possible and safe and enjoyable for people to walk, they do that. Additionally, walkable. Sorry, Additionally, walkable and transit accessible communities are more equitable for people who can't or don't drive. Many people who have disabilities are not able to operate a vehicle, and so giving them another transportation option provides a lot of freedom and autonomy. Research has been done that found that children raised in walkable communities actually have greater economic mobility, regardless of where they start socioeconomically. And walkable communities build social capital. Research has shown that streets with lower traffic, neighbors know each other more. Walkable communities are positively associated with higher rates of civic engagement through voting and volunteering. And I think we've all had the experience, you have some lovely little downtown cluster centers around your transit stations. I'm sure we've all had the experience of being in one of those areas and just unexpectedly encountering, that old friend you haven't seen in a while, your kid's teacher, your dentist, whoever it might be. And those sort of spontaneous day-to-day little social connections is really what builds community. It's what builds that social capital that makes us feel connected to each other, to the place where we live. And when we're all in our cars all the time, we're not able to have those kinds of connections. Next slide. And multifamily housing can take many forms. This is a visual that people have been using a lot lately. If you're in the housing world, it was put together by a firm called Opticos that sort of specializes in missing middle housing, which is modest, sort of gentle density housing intended for those who are not eligible for income restricted affordable housing, but who cannot afford current market rate prices. Which is where a lot of young people like myself sort of find ourselves. We make enough money that we can't qualify for affordable housing, but not quite enough money to actually be able to buy a home. And so this is really the target. It's the duplexes, the fourplexes, the little courtyard cottage, the townhouses. That's the type of housing that we are trying to make it possible to build. So in Needham specifically, obviously you are a commuter rail community, you probably all know that, which means that your deadline is the end of this year, December 31st, when the clock strikes, when we're all cheersing for the Happy New Year. So the minimum land area that needs to be included in this district is 50 acres, which might sound like a lot, but it's actually like 1% of your land square mileage. An acre is a lot smaller than people think that it is. You actually, around your 4 stations, you have over 1,200 acres of land that would be potentially eligible to be a part of this district. So 50 acres is a very small portion of what could theoretically be included. The district needs to have a zoned capacity of 1,784, and I will get to that in a second to explain what zone capacity actually means. And 90% of that needs to be within that half-mile area around your 4 stations. Not all communities have a percentage that's that high. It's sort of it has to do with how many stations you have. So the fact that you have 4 stations means that the state wants to see the vast majority of your zoning district be in that area. Yeah.
What would happen if you didn't meet those requirements?
That's a great question. So there are 2 primary consequences of noncompliance. The first is loss of access to, I think at this point it's 17 different state grants. Some of the main ones being MassWorks, which funds a lot of infrastructure work all around the state, Housing Choice, which funds a lot of housing work all around the state, and then a wide swath of other grant programs for different areas. So that is sort of, I would say, one of the biggest consequences. Many towns rely on MassWorks to be able to fund roads and other important projects. And then additionally, there is the potential for legal action from the state.
Did you link the school, the MBTA funding?
School funding at this point is not linked in. Next slide. I'm actually almost done, so if people have more questions, we're almost ready. So when I talk about zoning capacity, that 1,784 number, the state is not saying that Needham has to build 1,784 houses. Zoning and production are not the same thing, oftentimes totally incongruous with one another. So zoning capacity means what is allowed on that parcel of land, which actually has nothing to do with what is on the land. So this is a visual that helps me sort of understand it. On this parcel of land, it is zoned for up to 4 units. So its zoning capacity is 4. And that remains true whether there's 2 units on it, 0 units on it, or 4 units on it. The capacity remains the same. And so that is what we're measuring, is what is allowed based off of the rules of what's on the ground. That's literally the argument. Another way I talk about it is, if you think of a platter of cookies, zoning is the platter and the cookies are the homes on the platter. What the state wants to see is that you have a platter that could theoretically accommodate up to 1,784 cookies, but they are not coming to count the cookies. So you might end up with 2 cookies on that platter. You might end up with the full 1,700. But what they want to see is that you have a platter that could theoretically accommodate it. So how can you participate in this process as Needham works towards compliance before that deadline? There's a few things. So if you're not already a part of this housing coalition, joining the housing coalition will be a great way to stay informed, to be able to make sure that your voice is included. When we're able to sort of speak cohesively as a group, we have so much more power, and our voices are, that much more powerful when we're speaking together. Attending public hearings, any sort of, whether it's an official planning board hearing, a workshop, an informational session, anytime the town or you have your home, your committee that's sort of leading the charge on this, has something open to the public that you can attend, trying to come to those as much as possible, and making sure that when you're going to those meetings, you're putting forth your vision and your priority and your goals for the future of Newton. What do you want this community to look like in 20 years? Who should be able to come and live here? What are your priorities around affordability requirements? The town could require that a certain percentage of the units be deed restricted affordable, or they could not. Do you want to require open space, mixed use development? What are your thoughts about design standards and guidelines? All of these are ways that you can make sure that your priorities are considered in the process. Talking to your neighbors, not just about this, but about the need to create more housing and opportunities in Needham more broadly, and the significance of this moment in particular. This is a chance where, some rules are going to be put into place that will really be driving the kinds of housing that we're seeing in the next 10 to 20 years. The unfortunate reality of housing work is that it is very
slow. And so we need to be thinking far into the future. And now is the moment to participate in that. And noticing who is missing from the conversation. So when you go to meetings, you know, there's nothing wrong with living in a single family home, but making sure that people who live in other types of housing are also present at these meetings, present in the conversation. People with different perspective, people with children, people with grandchildren, teachers, people who work for the town, small business owners, trying to ensure utilizing your community connections and relationships to try to make sure that as many voices and as broad a spectrum of opinions are being brought to the table. Next slide. Utilizing your own personal networks, you know, whether you're part of a neighborhood council or association, you know, your peers at your kid's school, work, local businesses, faith groups. We all have our own communities and networks where we live, and making sure you're tapping into those. Like, do people know that this is going on? And, you know, what do they think about it? Not overestimating what people know. Zoning can get very technical and wonky and dry and complicated, and it does often require, you know, continued repeating, continued education. So, you know, trying to make sure people are given the opportunity to educate themselves, directing them to some of the many resources that the Housing Coalition has, that CHAPA has, that Mass Housing Partnership has. You can write op-eds or letters to the editor, table at town events, share on social media, make sure that people understand what this actually is. Because their misinformation can spread really quickly when it comes to something that people don't totally understand. Focusing on what you are most passionate about. You know, there are a lot of pieces to this puzzle. I don't think all of us need to be advocating for everything, but what about this really matters to you? And I think when we can really hone in on what we're most passionate about, to kind of have that like guiding star for our advocacy, it can make our advocacy more effective. And also, I think when we try to do everything, it's easy to get overwhelmed. So focusing on what you care about and what feels doable for you, I think is a good way to approach something that is going to be going on throughout the whole year. And also, not my final piece of advice, as you go to these meetings, you might encounter some people who are quite angry about this. It is change. Change is inevitable. This is our opportunity to be a part of shaping that change and making sure that it's change that we want to see. But anytime there is change, there is, I heard a microphone. Me on the mic. After your namesake. It's easy to go to those meetings, see people ranting and raving, like, oh, this isn't going to happen. Feel that despair, that hopelessness, or like it's maybe not worth it to keep going. But don't be fooled, because the angriest voices almost never represent the community at large. And we've seen this in the communities that have passed their districts, which at this point is about 24, that even in places where there was really organized and vocal opposition, they passed it with flying colors. So, you know, in Arlington, they had the Arlington Residents for Responsible Redevelopment, is what they call themselves. And they were very against the MBTA multifamily zoning. They flyered every house in Arlington. They had lawn signs, they had a website, they had a lot of money, and Arlington still passed it by 87%. In Brookline, also a very well-organized, well-funded anti-housing group, they passed it by over 90%. So time and time again, you know, I'll say for myself, this has been my biggest lesson in 2023, is there were communities where I was, might not happen, like, I don't feel good about this. And then they just sailed past the threshold that was required. So I think, you know, I'm coming into 2024 feeling very positive and hopeful, because I'm seeing a lot of communities stepping up to the plate, seeing this for the opportunity that it is, and taking advantage. So let's show them that Needham can do it even better than any of them. And I will be taking questions. Yeah.
Is this was a town meeting, is the 2/3 vote for?
So I can repeat the questions. So the question was, what is the majority required? This is the simple majority. If you stick within the guidelines. Some communities have packed a lot of extra stuff. So sometimes communities are sort of approaching this of like, they're packing a lot of zoning changes into one warrant article. And sometimes in those cases, it does require a 2/3 majority because the other stuff packed in. But if you stick to what's within the MBTA zoning guidelines, it's a 51%. Yes.
We anticipate that our finance concerns itself with the business that they have of any development.
All right, and I'm Jean McKnight. I serve on the planning board and also on the Needham advisory committee. And I anticipate that our finance committee will be skeptical, as they always are, and will not have the right figures when it comes to the number of children who will live in multifamily housing. I live in a 105 unit multifamily condominium. Presently, there are 5 children. I've lived there for 10 years and I've seen 2 to 5 children living there. Of course, it's a condominium and I think that appeals to downsizing seniors, but it is not age restricted. My question is there a state study on this issue that would be helpful to the towns in really having the right numbers? The town did a study about 5 years ago, and it was very helpful in that regard. But it's a little bit old and not really up to date right now.
Yes, the good news is yes. And those are the exact concerns that we hear in every community. And so the good thing about that is that we've now gathered a lot of data to be able to respond to that. So Metropolitan Area Planning Council has a very in-depth study that they did, and I can email it to you directly if you want to give me your email address. Looking at the relationship between housing production and school all across the state, and they found unequivocally that school enrollment is either going down or stagnating, staying the same, even in communities that are seeing an increase in housing. It's Needham. I don't recall the exact number. I want to say it was like housing production grew by 5% and student enrollment stayed pretty much the same. It's something in that ballpark. But that's true. The only places where we're seeing an increase in school enrollment is like a select portion of inner core communities, like Arlington's had a big school enrollment increase. So that's one piece. And that was statewide. From the finance perspective, we need to go back and look at any sort of statewide comprehensive study, but I have a lot of case studies that have shown the fiscal benefits of creating multifamily housing. This is just anecdotal, but I was meeting with the planner in Norwood last week in one of the communities that's participating. And she had shared about this one development that I want to say it was like maybe 100 units, 150 units. I'll have to go back in my notes, but the home that was previously on that parcel, it was generating, I want to say, she said like $80,000 in tax revenue a year. The new building is generating close to $700,000 in tax revenue a year. So more people equals more taxes, and it, sort of economies of scale. The cost of providing municipal services to multifamily housing, sort of forgetting the exact right terminology, but it's not adding each unit of multifamily, each unit of housing within the multifamily home does not require the same level of investment of services that a single family does, if I'm expressing that correctly. I mean, just something as the same thing. So if you know that there's an important public hearing coming up, like rally a group of your peers and go together and make it. Yes.
No, to respond to that question, Steve, my name is Kate Gray, I'm a member of the select board and the chair. And what we would really love for you guys to do, especially some people, whatever, we'd love you to log in your town members. They all have email addresses. Then you can batch email them from the website, write to them, tell them why you support it and what it means to you to have family and other types of housing and reach directly to people who will be voting on this issue in October. Additionally, you can come to town meeting and you can speak on the floor of town meeting. You can address all of the people in the room at the time that they are having their hearts and minds pulled up at both sides and tell them why you want this. I have to say that the cost of sounding with them, theatrics, having young people come into the room at town meeting, is incredibly persuasive at that particular moment. So I would encourage you and everyone in the room to do both of those things. Those are the people who will be making this decision in October. And the more that you can reach out to them and make them understand your point of view, the better off. 100%. Yeah.
We'll tell you. So we're on it. Yeah, so for anyone on Zoom, the question was how do you find out about when these meetings are? So that's one of the benefits of the Housing Coalition is they will be helping track of them and make sure, so, you know, assuming you're on their mailing list and have access to that information, that will be a great way. Do you know if there's a dedicated web page on the town website?
If you just look up town meeting.
Or
Look up.
They, MBTA community, the planning part, and then under the planning. Look up, MBTA. Housing need advisory group and you'll find all of them.
Or you could just call town hall and say, and that's.
Did we also say that definitely talk to your parents?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Get them to run town meeting.
Yeah.
If they, wow.
Otherwise, don't go.
I will help. So I do. But, yeah. It's only I drove on, so it's like, wow, and you're up on stuff, let's go. And I think I'm speaking for myself, commuting on our train for 20-something years and being so not plugged into town. I think having you guys who are plugged in town, allowing your parents into town with those kinds of subjects is really important. So it's and it should for most sessions.
Yeah, just to also second what Heidi said, in Lexington, who were the first to pass their district it was late April 2023, and they have the same deadline as you, but they were like, no, get it. One, I think of a significant turning point in that town meeting was a young Latinx man who grew up in Lexington in affordable housing. I think he's 21 now, he's a student at Harvard. And he stood up and shared his story and shared how important having the opportunity to live in Lexington had been for him and his development and how it led him to where he is now and how badly he wants to be able to move back there and have his family there, but how that is just completely outside the realm of possibility for him. And I heard from so many people who were there that his comment, it was like you felt the energy change in the room. So I totally agree that lean into your youth. Yeah.
Yes, hi, my name is Frank Flynn. As I'm looking through Oscar's doctoral thesis here, with these beautiful photographs and so forth, I do notice some beautiful pictures of houses with commercial development on the bottom, shops and things like that. Is the Communities Act, is it like encouraging or neutral on that point, or something?
Design question.
Yes, no, absolutely. So there is the option for a mandatory mixed use requirement within your MBTA district. there's a few things to consider. If you were to choose that option, only 25% of your district's capacity, so about of that 1,700, 440 thesis man here, 446 of those units could be within that area that requires mixed use, but you could not require it across your entire 3A district. I will say that the majority of communities that I am working with are choosing not to pursue the mandatory mixed use, but to do one of the following. Either if your district is placed in areas that currently have mixed use and you really don't want to lose it, or you want to encourage more of it, providing density bonuses or other incentives to the developer to build mixed use, but not requiring it. So you could allow mixed use by right, making it much easier, and you could sweeten the pot with some various incentives to really encourage it, but you couldn't require it. That's what a lot of people are doing. The other alternative is to focus your districts in the greatest proximity possible to your existing mixed use, to really encourage that kind of transit-oriented development and bring as much housing as possible close to those various like retail and services. And then potentially doing a separate zoning change to that mixed use area to further encourage mixed use development separately from 3A. So I think each community is sort of trying to be creative with, you know, if they have a really bustling existing sort of town center mixed use area and they don't want to mess with it, they're putting their homes around it, maybe throwing some incentives. Other communities that maybe just have like a little bit of activity, but would like to encourage more, are bringing their 3A district into that area to specifically try to revitalize it. So it's circumstantial, but there are different ways people are. Yeah.
Bob Smart, former planning board member. I think that mandatory mixed use is a really bad idea, except perhaps in the downtown, for a couple of reasons. One, if you're mandating commercial type use on the first floor, that's square footage that's not going to be used for housing, is one. Second thing is that in most parts of town where you have mixed use properties, that first floor, retail or whatever, is actually a money loser. It's easier if you're trying to pull the money together to do a project to have something that's just one use.
Yeah, it's true. Financially, mixed use development does tend to be harder, and not as many developers do it. But certainly, I'm a big fan of mixed use development, but done in a way that will actually encourage it to happen and not just prevent us. Yeah.
I think I'll take the opposite opinion on that one. I do think that, yeah. I think just, we've had this discussion many times, and it's really subtle, lots of components to it, but when you have a commercial area that it has happened over time. I mean, look at the Heights. I mean, the Heights basically has standalone residential. There is no mandated commercial, but it happened. So, okay, we can leave the zoning as it is, and then it could, yeah, put incentives in for more housing, but and then maybe it disappears, and maybe it doesn't. But I guess the question really is it valuable to that area to really protect it, and then find other places, like you were saying, just bring the housing here and around it and let it survive? Because I know there are challenges to landlords and making these things pencil out, and some developers are better at it than others. But there's a great value to the community, I think, to know that it's going to be there. That's all. I think it's nice to respect it and figure out other ways to put the housing in around it, because we definitely need the housing to support it. That's the growth.
Right. You know, and then hopefully you can, if you build more housing close to your existing commercial uses, drive more business to those businesses, which is then going to bring even more businesses to the area and I do know that a lot of communities are sort of taking that, like a housing first approach. Let's provide customers that makes businesses come and take advantage of those customers, not take advantage, but serve them. Yeah.
So, my name is Mike Fish. At a recent home meeting, several individuals got up and shared their fears about housing, more housing. And one of the simplest and easiest thing to say is, gosh, this is complicated. This is complicated stuff. We should just go slow. We don't need to rush into anything. And the best thing for us to do, in fact, is to do the least we have to possibly do. And we can always do more later. And then you have somebody else who's concerned about storm drains. And this sort of death by 1,000 cuts, enough people get up and share their concerns, and suddenly you find yourself not able to do much. And so my question for you is, what are some of the major arguments that you had heard over the years, Newton and Arlington, other places, and how did you address those?
Yeah. Great question. Thank you. So one response that seems to work in a lot of places is, can your kids afford to move back here? If we're talking to a group of people who are likely of a generation that their kids have moved out, wouldn't you like for your kids to move back here? And can they afford to? Another way of presenting it is, if you were 25, 30 now, trying to buy the house you currently live in at its current price, would you be able to do that? And I think that often turns a light on for people, because it's easy to look at, if you're very comfortable in your housing situation, if you're in a community, your friends and family are all very comfortable in their housing situation, it's easy to look at the housing shortage as something sort of far away from you and not relevant to you and not your problem. But I think when people are able to recognize that even they themselves, who think, I earned this, I worked hard and I earned having a home, to be able to recognize, like, oh yeah, even I wouldn't be able to do this now, I think can be very impactful for people. I'm a big fan of stories. I'm actually teaching a workshop on storytelling for social change on Friday. And I really think when people are able to share their own personal stories about their kind of housing life cycle, as we call it, whether it's that young man at the Lexington meeting or someone of any age, to be able to share those stories, I think tends to move people a lot more effectively than just sharing data. I shared a lot of data tonight because my goal here is to educate people, not necessarily to convince you to vote a certain way. But this is not the same approach I would take if that was my goal. So leaning on stories, trying to make it personal for people, not in a that kind of way, but helping them understand sort of their place in this whole thing. I think also getting to the root of oftentimes maybe what someone might express as their concern is sort of the top layer of it. So asking more questions to understand what really is of it, which for me can also be helpful in determining how convincible are you? Because if someone says, I'm worried that our schools are going to be overrun and my child's education is going to be worsened somehow, and you start to ask questions, and as you get a little further, it starts to become clear that either maybe that's sort of like a false concern they're throwing out to hide their real concerns. Maybe there's some very overt or covert racism or classism, whether they're aware of it or not. And I think when we sort of get to the root of it, it makes us better prepared to be like, yeah, thank you. That's my cue to stop talking. You'll never take this mic. To either recognize, you know what, we are operating in such different worlds that I don't think I can convince you, so I can just sort of acknowledge your humanity and move on. Or like, oh, okay, you actually just need a little bit of information and I can get you there. So I think just my technique is sort of ask some more questions to understand what the real concern is and how worth it is it. Because there's no point in getting into a fight with someone that just fundamentally doesn't see the world the same way you do.
Thank you, Lily. I think we're gonna close for questions right now because we do have a second part of our agenda that we do want to get to. Oscar is going to try and give us the abridged version. But we did start around 10 minutes late, so feel free to stick around afterwards if you guys have any questions or lob them her way.
Last subject came up, I'm sorry, yeah. I think that what you left out respectfully is that some of the concerns may be legitimate.
Yeah.
I mean, embedded in your answer sort of was that, well, are they real? Let's find out. I mean, this whole thing about drainage, I don't understand. And thankfully my house doesn't get it, but the people around the corner get it all the time. That, I don't know if it's legitimate, but I think that assuming that, let's get down the layers and, well, we know in town there are enough people complaining about flooding in their basements that, you know, I know that I think the select board set up a committee on that very issue. So, I think it would just, we would be wise to be cautious to not assume that people's objections are, I mean, and I do that. When I hear people say, I think the school, this could impact the schools, having grown up in Boston in the 60s and 70s, I hear raised right away, okay? And that may not be fair. And maybe people think, well, the class size is getting bigger and we're worried about that. So I should, that's just my point of view.
It's just understand better, because if it is, you know, a very fair concern, being able to address that in a way that might hopefully help them understand it better. Or maybe it's something we don't have an answer to. And it's like, oh, we better bring that to the town because we actually haven't thought about that. So just trying to better kind of understand their motivation. Is this a workable conversation? Or should I just bid you a good day? In terms of this, people love talking about stormwater, which is kind of funny because it has nothing to do with multi-family housing. And in fact, if we lose MassWorks funding, then we will lose a huge source of revenue to be able to address some of our stormwater infrastructure needs.
Anything of this you take that into consideration. Really not.
Exactly.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's good. But we should make sure that all resources you are offering tonight, we will make sure we get this up site, so we have all of that stuff available. So what am I using for, like, are we all using this, or are we using? Is this a?
Use the handheld, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
And everybody online, thank you guys for being here, and just want to say hi, make sure that you're hearing everything and seeing everything.
It's not a
Okay.
slideshow.
So what I think this is, we're not going to go through the script at all here. I think this is great. Thank you, Lily, for having this conversation and sharing your experience. I think one of the things that well, we got to show a hands. How many people were either Zooming or attending on Monday night at Heidi's party? Yeah. Okay. So I think the reason that this slide is up is that it's kind of the starting point, and who knows where we're going to end up. But the map on the right was the map that maybe you've seen them. It's the simplified version of a map that our coalition has put together. On the left is the map that is the scenario A coming in home. And so I think if I were to say at 30,000 feet, and Heidi's going to correct me if I'm wrong, that the meeting and
came to a conclusion at the end of a long, interesting discussion that what the base scheme for compliance is being defined. A lot of it was defined Monday, and then it is essentially to get to a number of units and then have a cushion of 10%. So it's somewhere just shy of 2,000 units as the zoning target. And that it was interestingly addressing a very important thing about parking requirements, taking down parking requirements from 1.5 cars per unit to 1. I think that's an interesting move. And that they were aggressively looking at ways to put housing where we know there's a interesting opportunity. I think Chestnut Street, everybody felt that was important as an area that could really benefit from more housing and more development. It's a sort of an uncooked environment that could really be quite wonderful as a place for the town to grow. And then I think what comes next, if we say that there's a base game, and there was an analogy that was kind of interesting. If you're going into buying a car and the base car is base, and you kind of go, okay. And then you look at the car with some, and where do we all go? We want the car with the options, probably. So I think we kind of get the best of both worlds if we have the base scheme that we know it addresses the issues we have, but then we rally around what we would like to say is maybe it's the housing choice plan, maybe it's the opportunity plan, maybe it's the plan that gives us Needham, puts Needham on the map as a place that really wants to address their housing challenges. And I think that's what we're all here together to talk about. And yeah, yes.
Hi, everyone. Not trying to take over, but I just want to make sure, because I'm not sure that Oscar was explicit about saying it. At our meeting, we decided on a 2-article strategy. So what we did at our meeting the other night was define our first article, the base compliance article. So this is going to be making sure that we hit our number 1784 with a little bit of a cushion. We defined the only that portion. The second map, the second article that town meeting will be asked to vote will be an additional, that's over, an additional bunch of zoning rules that will add to the base that we put together on Monday. That's heated steering wheel, everything. So I do want to make sure that everyone understands we're going with 2 articles. One is the basics. It will get us compliance. Town meeting members and the select board and planning board, we have a fiduciary responsibility to the town to make sure that we're compliant. We don't want to lose that. We don't want to be sued to the state. So we have to make that happen. On top of that, we want all the goodies that we think reasonably pass through town meeting. So we're doing two articles. I just want to make sure that that strategy was clear. I don't want people to think that we're stopping where we left off on Monday.
Thank you. I didn't name it, but I think what I meant to say was that there was. Oh, for sure. I just thank you for calling me on that. Yes. And again, I think it's important to say that your next challenge is to do that next map or to do that next area or whatever the definition will be that you think is going to be the second article. And I think that's the one that probably is where our interests are potentially. I think I speak for many of us here. And so I think that's the almost the fun part, because it is where we get to have those conversations about what are the areas that we think are the places that we can grow. And so I don't really want to get into all the details. I think there's not enough time, and we would like to do more meetings to have those conversations. Yes.
Well, that second article be at the same time, maybe. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
Can you repeat the question in the
Yes.
microphone? Thank
So
you.
that was, will the second article that Heidi described be part of town meetings vote? And yes, that's correct. Yes.
Let me take a say, it's going to be in October.
Right.
Yeah.
And, I'm sorry to distract from your very pretty maps. For the second article, will there be process around that? I have fear of, we're gonna put all these really things that I might think are great into a second article, but because of that, it's not gonna be realistic that people are gonna use, right? Like if we address parking and affordability and green space and climate and everything, like, and make it into this great package. And I only like one out of the 5 things I'm against, right? Not me, but like, so, is there thought of how to get the things, I mean, how are you, what are you gonna choose that will be passed?
Yeah, that's what the committee is.
Okay.
working.
Okay, and is affordability in there? Because, you know, I don't think Lily mentioned it, none of this talks about affordable housing.
You can stick around afterwards
Alright.
and talk
Thanks, I,
details, but that's, I don't want to take away from their presentation. I also, our next meeting is the 15th and 12th. We'll be having all of these conversations for a long time that night, but you can watch how everything falls out.
That's me.
Just like a quick question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trying to get,
Helpful. Anyway, probably for others, to walk through the process of, it's not just going to the town meeting. There are several steps, as I understand it, in between the planning board and select board. Could you maybe walk through what happens? And then if people find it helpful, if not, I'll ask Patty later. Sure. Like, yeah, let's do it.
thank you. It's not that I don't want to talk about it. It's fascinating. I have been talking about it nonstop. I didn't want to take over, but I did feel like it was important. It's anxious. All right, now, so, the timeline. So we just had our meeting on, Monday, that was the 29th. Our next home meeting, it's a very tight schedule. Our next home meeting is the 15th, and we'll be working on the substantive decisions that need to be made for that second portion of the map. In between that, we're going to be informing the select board, going to a meeting and making a presentation to the planning board, same thing, going to the meeting, making a presentation on March 7th. We are going to be meeting in an open meeting, but not a community meeting. We have had to change the date, so please note, the community meeting that until now has been scheduled for March 7th is now pushed to March 28th. That will be in Powers Hall, same thing, the whole shebang, just as we've always done. But on March 7th, we will be revisiting both of our maps, making sure that everything is compliant, making sure that we have the readouts from our 2 consultants who have been hired with us through the entire process to make sure that we're compliant, to talk about the economic feasibility impact study, to talk about report outs from our major departments in town, like DPW, talking about stormwater and the school enrollment numbers and all of that, all of the stuff that goes into those maps. These are, again, your open meetings. You can come, you can zoom in, but they're not public meetings. You'll be taking public comment. I have to say that the discussion to create the base map, I thought, was incredible. Everyone was so thoughtful and so, there are many opposing views on our own committee, and everyone was respectful and listened to what everyone else had to say. These are really thoughtful, deep conversations about zoning and the impact that something has on people's lives. So I would really encourage you to listen, especially on the meeting 15. It does take a long time. I want to grab a bag of popcorn, but it is really worth listening to the conversation. Following the meeting on the 28th, we will be turning the plan over to HLC, the Department of Housing and Livable Communities. This is the agency that's going to be running us through their compliance model. This is state saying yay or nay. There have been some communities that have seen some of their choices overturned. So it is important to us that we bring to town meeting a compliant model that's been you know, all the Ts are crossed and the Is are dotted. We need to give them 90 days to make that assessment. So we won't get our plan back till midsummer. Okay, at that point, the plan goes to the planning board. Planning board will already begin their discussions and their deliberations. They will also hold public hearing in their normal course of business. And nothing comes to town meeting without public hearing. Okay, so there are public hearings to make the housing. There are public hearings with the home committee. There are going to be public hearings with the planning board. And the planning board will, at the end of their deliberation, will bring these two articles to town meeting in October, Powers Hall, 7 p.m. Possibly on the 21st, we'll see. And that is where town meeting deliberating.
I just to clarify, it's only the base plan, finance one that we go to, you know.
No, both will go.
They both.
I do want to be respectful of folks' times.
Yeah.
I know that we did start a little late. We started around 10 minutes late. So our program is running a little bit over. I'm not going to cut us off. I'm just going to go for it. We didn't have any questions fielded on Zoom. I let them know that if they did have any questions afterward, they could feel free to reach out to me or reach out to you guys via your website or via your email. You guys are welcome to stay, but please just turn your attention to Paula and Jen for closing remarks, and then we can continue the discussion afterwards in smaller groups.
No, that's perfect. Thank you. Yeah, just a couple of things, starting with Jay.
Great. Well, Lily had a list of things for how you can participate, and Oscar alluded to the fact that we could use town meeting members to vote for the rezoning. Not as slam dunk. I'm watching a lot of Celtics lately. Town meeting go like the Celtics are going right now. But what we have are sheets showing you how to run for town meeting. And I know some of you already are. It's not difficult. I went to town hall today and 6 out of the 10 precincts don't have 8 candidates yet. We need 8. Pardon me? Oh, just, I mean, my glasses to ground already. Okay, precinct A only has 4 candidates, precinct B 7, C 7, D 8, I mean, D it's always full, E 6, F 8, G 8, H only has 5, I have 6, J has 9. B does have a 1-year slot in addition to the 8 3-year slots. So for those of you who don't know, actually, I think it was Jean over here told me the other day that she became a town meeting member the first time when there weren't 8 candidates, and she had herself and 3 of her friends write her name in, and she won. So, you know, that's the easiest way to do it. And she's been with us for many years after that.
Deadline is, I would say, like the end of February.
February 20th is when you need to get your signatures in. So it's very easy to, if there are more sheets on the table in case you run out.
Yeah, there's a bajillion.
Okay. No, only 10 for town meeting. And so it's going to get 12 or 13 just in case they can't read somebody's signature. It really is pretty easy. We are here to support you if it looks like it's going to be a race. It isn't that hard to make it a good campaign and win, but there are some things that you want to do, and we can help you with that. So this is important. We need voices. You said voice votes, and we need, you know, you to bring your loud voice if you come. So anyway, so please use this if you'd like some support, and encourage other people if you're already a town meeting member. We really need it. Thank you.
That's right.
Last but not least.
Yeah. So just a couple of housekeeping kinds of things. You're all here at the Needham Housing Coalition. Some of you have been involved in things that we've been doing. Some of you have not. We invite you to be part of those things. We have working groups where you can actually try to get some stuff done, putting together some educational pieces, working on the MBTA recommendations to home, you know, what we think like, we need technical support. And I bet you have ideas about what you think we should be doing. And even if it's one little thing, we would love to hear from you. So there is a sign-up sheet over there that we'll reach out, we'll talk about it. How can we use your skills in a way that works for you to further our goals of seeing more variety of housing in Needham? Our next meeting is on February 29th, and we have Amy Dane speaking for us. She is an amazing researcher and reporter who's done research on zoning and the history of zoning in our area. It's a wonderful presentation. And then Jesse Kenson Benabov from Abundant Housing Massachusetts is coming in March. And we hope to do, you know, some Q&A around both of those as well. If you're not already on our mailing list, and you know if you are because you get newsletters from us, but if you're not, we hope that you will sign up. There's a QR code over there that will take you to a Linktree page that we have, which has links to information, links to how to get your very own yard sign, links to a petition that we have where we're looking for resident signatures to show strength and show home and the planning board that there is a lot of passion for this subject. So we will all, many of us will hang around. There's obviously a lot of conversation, a lot of questions, but we do want to end. Say goodnight and come back, but do keep in touch. Yes.
Bob Smart again. I'd just like to make a brief sort of public service announcement here. I'm representing the Needham Housing Authority, and the Housing Authority has some zoning articles and non-zoning articles which are going to be on the town meeting floor in May. You know, the first, this starts the first Monday in May. And there's a public hearing on February 27th. Gene, do you know where it's going to be? It's either town hall or the Charles River Room. Okay. I don't know. Anyway, there's a public hearing on the 27th. And, you know, the Housing Authority right now, you know, they want to redo all the existing units for a total condition and add about another 95 truly affordable units. They're proposing a significant rezoning, which will provide for much greater density than exists currently and for 4-story buildings. If you believe in housing production and affordable housing, you need to go up and you need to say it out loud to people around the town. You know, 4 stories is okay. Greater density per unit is okay. You're not going to get housing if you don't, if you aren't willing to take that position.
Thank you. Can we excited about communications with you?
Stick around or not.
Or.
March summer.